Welcome everyone to the second session of What's Editing Anyway, the interview series that we had launched last fortnight. So today's session is going to be slightly different. It won't really be an interview. We will have two editors in conversation with each other. And one of them is our regular ICF member, Priya Talwar. And she will be talking to Surit Das, who has been an ICF member since the very beginning. So over to you, Priya and Surit.
Thank you, Vivek. Thank you so much. And also Murugraj. This is the second interview, and the title, as he's introduced, is What's Editing Anyway? Before I introduce Surit, I would just like to quickly introduce the series, the title, the concept, what's the meaning behind it. What's Editing Anyway? It started as a blog series, and now with ICF, becoming even more proactive, I found a great platform to make a real dialogue out of it. And the title, as it simply conveys, the idea is to, just talk about what editing is. What is the big deal about it? Is there any big deal about it? What if there isn't? Like, what if editing is just about any other profession, right? What if there is no big deal about what we do? And if there is, then we really need to articulate that. And I think today there could be no better person, than to talk about this, the perception and the reality, with someone who's quite senior, quite established. Surit Das is an independent editor who writes reports for businesses and nonprofits. He's had quite an incredible journey. He began with sales. Surit, you can pitch in and tell us what you did initially. Quickly give us an introduction and how is it that you started to edit? Because I realized that ICF members, not all of them wanted to edit initially. Some of them have found and discovered editing as their calling. So if you can quickly tell us, initially what you were doing and how you arrived at this profession.
Yeah, so um, to spare people the details of my misspent youth as I think about it, 93 to 2002, I used to be a salesman for reasons of circumstances. And then for a while, I wanted to be a sub editor at the Telegraph or the Business Standard in the mid 90s. Didn't work out. In 2002, I moved to Delhi. I was in Calcutta previously, and I was looking for a job, and I stumbled into this copy editing job, and then I tried for a very long time to get out of it. Still trying, but I haven't succeeded yet. Um,
That's
so
great to hear.
that's basically it. And as far as not wanting to copy edit is concerned, yeah, I mean, I've never really wanted to copy edit. Didn't know what copy editing was when I joined it. Had I known, I'd probably have stayed away. And I'm still trying in some ways to get out of it. But so far, it's been rewarding in the sense it pays the bills and the market has good things to say. So from that perspective, it's been all right.
And we have spoken a couple of times now about what this interview is going to be. As Vivek rightly said, this is not a formal interview at all. We want you guys to feel as if it's two friends, two editors talking to each other about everything under the sun. Yes, of course, editing largely, but also things that are not to do with editing but are still part of our lives as professional editors. One of the things that we have been wanting to talk about majorly is, I would say, it's really the perception of editing. I titled the series as What's Editing Anyway, when, to be able to start that dialogue. Surit also had a like-minded idea that he said, I want to speak about what do we talk about, what do we mean really when we talk about editing. And I think that's a great way to begin that conversation, because it's really not the beginning. We'll probably start somewhere in the middle, and I'll just give him a prompt, which we have briefly touched upon, which is, I was also reading this very specific blog that he had shared, and I'm sure a lot of people already know Richard Adden, the one of the finest editors and bloggers. His URL we can share later. American WordPress is his URL, the blog link. He talks about editing rates, the perception, how you are a business owner, not just a freelance editor. And one of the finest things he says, something that resonates for me, and I've heard someone else say it. And I think the reason why I'm doing what's editing anyway is precisely that. He talks about how we as editors, I quote him right now, our profession has failed to convince clients of editing's value. We have done little to nothing to counter that perception that we are low level professionals who provide an unnecessary service, right? So I am here, and I invite everyone here to participate to be able to counter that perception. Are we really low level professionals who are just about giving any damn service? Is it really of no value? And more importantly, what have we done to counter that impression? If that impression has been created already, if that perception was created say 5 years ago, 10 years ago, what are we doing today to counter that impression? So Surit, what are your thoughts on that?
So first, the first rule in marketing is that you will find the converted and you will preach to them. You will not try to convert the heathens, the people who do not believe. You're not a social reformer. You will not try to tell people who don't understand the value of editing that it is valuable. So that's the first rule. Um, the second is to find out who the people are who have the capacity to pay, the willingness to pay, who understand the value of editing, and who can be persuaded to believe by means of a simple test. By test, I mean a sample. So, for instance, about 2 years back, I was talking to a guy, he'd written a book on how the desires of the Indian middle class have been shaped by the advertising industry over the past 25 years. This was meant to be for popular reading, primarily retail sales. And it was written in a language that only media studies professionals could even begin to hope to understand.
Tell me you
So,
wanted to edit that.
no, it was when it came when I started talking to the guy. It was in the final stages of being published by a very large press here, um, and I told him that, well, maybe for the next book you would want to think about toning it down, making it simple. I said it's simple, and I said, let me show you what I mean. So I looked at the introduction and I did, for no fee, the first and the second paragraphs. And he said that, all right, second book, you do it. We'll figure out the cost later. I'm working on it now. So the point I'm trying to make is that if you have a certain imagination of what a book should be, what a sentence should be, what words to use, what words not to use, and you find a person who is persuadable, to coin a word, who is in the position to buy. Um, so you know that you can maybe go out on a limb, do a free sample test, and start a conversation. So, and there are two kinds of things, right? So, I walk into a store that sells shoes that start at 25,000 rupees. The salesman is going to give me a very wide berth. He's going to figure out that I'm not his buyer. But somebody else walks in, they'll figure it out that, okay, this guy can be persuaded to buy some shoes. So it's a bit like that. But we got started at a tangent to what I really want to talk about, and that also talks about the things that you want to talk about, and that is, well, it all started, this conversation that we're having right now. It started when I saw your interview of Dola about 2 weeks back, and I was looking at it, the interview, watched it about 3 times, and what I felt was that there was a certain structure at work inside your head, both heads, that was deeply, deeply interesting to me. And that structure was basically that there was some pretty fundamental thinking about niches in the market, markets in the niche, uh, how you want to go about your life, not just your editing life. And I can't give you specific examples here, but I was reminded of a conversation, well, not between you and me, but about 2 odd years back when we'd met at that horrendously noisy cafe. They couldn't drown out one thing you said, which is that you wanted to quit your job editing books and freelance. And I didn't know that there was a market for freelance editors of nonfiction books. Okay. And sometime back, I see a fairly familiar face on LinkedIn talking about books and editing and so on, and it's you. And so you made the change. So tell me, how did it occur to you that there might be a market for nonfiction editors, especially outside the structure of publishing houses?
It's a very, very interesting question. Thank you a lot. Thanks a lot for that, Surit. I want to quickly first go to, another point that you had said. You raised 2 points. The second one you said, you have to find someone who can be persuaded, because you really can't be wasting your time and the other person's time when you know, and I want to change, qualify it a little bit more, is that when you know that person doesn't share the same values. Values as in, it could be I share, I value discipline, I value time, maybe timely delivery of money, maybe value honesty, maybe I don't value honesty. So when you and your client share those set of values, right, that is when you also figure out, that is one of the ways to figure out, yes, that person is can be persuaded. And of course, if you cannot persuade, it's not a comment on your merit. Could be any reason that you did not then grab that deal. But now I like to come back to your question. It's very specific and it's a very question. You're asking how did I know and whether I did know that there was a market for books. So I'll tell you specifically, when you and I met in that cafe in CCD, I was working. I think that point of time I was working on the desk with the magazine, the news magazine, and the nature of their work, the editing was very, very rigorous. Like, it fascinated me, and at that point of time, I knew I had to engage with books, because the amount of engagement, the time and commitment needed for an article, form journalistic article, that's lesser as compared to your engagement and your commitment with the book. And since I've always been a reader, all these things came together, and I knew that I had to try it. And then I started to read up, for example, this blogger, EFA, so many resources, and I came across ICF, and I started doing a lot of courses. And then I joined, as a commissioning editor. It was only after that exposure and combined with, the research that was supplementary on the internet with people, where I was sure that developmental editing is very, very, critical and fundamental. Did I realize then at that point of time that there was a market specifically for the kind of editing I do today, for the specific kind of books that I want to work on? I wouldn't say I thought that far at that point of time, because I was quite new in that magazine at that time, probably when I met you. It was a very slow and organic process for me. And when I knew today, if I knew there is a market for X kind of books, for X kind of editing, that's because of the exposure I've had in a 9 to 5 job. Had I not been exposed, it is I don't know I don't know if I would have known what I know today. I'm not saying I should not have then taken that leap. Of course not. But I must say that yes, there is a need for developmental editors, developmental editing for trade nonfiction, because I only look at trade, so I can't really talk about academic. Of course, academic also need developmental editors, but I don't know how much of it is outsourced.
All right. So we will talk about development editing for academic books. It's something I have some perspective on, so I can share that later. What I'm very interested in is, I was talking about persuading people, and you use the word client. Okay. Now, I have a problem with that word, because a client is somebody who works with you and who has paid you. Okay. Until the time you have received the payment, that person is a prospect, even while he's giving you work. Okay.
Yes.
No, there's a reason I use this differentiation, and that is that, as far as I'm concerned, in the trade that I'm in, a client is a person who's worked with you 3 or 5 times, uh, and you know how he thinks, how they think, and if they pay on time, if they're worth having over the long run. The other thing about a client is that when you acquire a client, you have to make sure that the rates are going to sustain you for the next 5 to 10 years, the life cycle of the client. Okay, because you can't go back every year and raise it by 8%, 5%, 10%. People tend to get a little bit jittery. Institutions have a problem raising rates every year. You give them a rate that they can work with for the next 5 to 7 years, it's all right. Okay, so I like to think of people who are talking to you about work as prospects and people who you have on board and have a relationship with, a business, a professional, a personal relationship with as clients. So that's one thing. The second thing is about development editing. Now, what is very intriguing about what you said about you're figuring things out as you go, about taking the plunge, as it were, and then figuring out the details, is that I would imagine, at least in my trade, it is true that when people talk to you about editing, they are not differentiating between development editing, substantive editing, copy editing. What they're essentially saying is, I've done the thinking, I've done the typing.
And you
Uh,
just do everything now.
by everything, they mean take it to the point where I can hit the send button on my email and forward it to the next guy in the process. Whether
Often
that's
they
the
also
type.
mean, often they also mean that's true for trade in the trade context because there is really low awareness. Authors automatically want all your questions to be answered, so they probably don't realize that the agent will do his job, the editor will do his job, the typesetter will do his job. But when they go to the editor, they come with so many doubts, so many questions, so many hesitations, and their fears of sharing their hearts with the world. They really, of course, expect, and that's why when I say persuade people, yes, clients are there, but when you say persuade people, I remember this one young boy I had met, and this was years ago. He was telling me, so I write short stories and poetry. So I said I edit, etc., etc. And then he asked me, and this is about persuading people, right? Not just clients, about what we do and what it is not that we do. So he said, but he got very, very like emotionally engaged. And he said, but what if you just change the meaning of what I've written? So I said, that's what a professional editor will never do. He will never, or she will never change your intent, the style, unless she's checked with you, understood what is it that you were trying to say. So the perception still remains, like if you're an editor, in my experience, people have not understood that there is a lot of segregation, like an editor, an agent, a typesetter, a proofreader will come in after this stage, X stage. So that, and combined with the perception that, just generally, I'm saying, if the aim of the series of the interview is to talk about editing and to break the myths and just see for ourselves, maybe we've missed myths, but I still think that there is a large myth still around that editors are going to like not understand what the author is trying to say. However, on the other hand, I feel, and I'm sure everyone will agree, that our primary job is really to first understand what the author is trying to say.
Yeah. So fundamentally, what is happening here is that I see this tendency a lot that we as editors talk about what the other guy should be doing, such as the client, such as the author. And my perspective on that is that it's up to me to explain what I do, what I do not do. So if you see Catherine's or Dick's uh, blog, um, websites actually, you will see a 500 word, 800 word description of what goes on. So before you actually take them on as a client, you got to read 2 pages of stuff that describe what they're going to do, what they're not going to do. They walk you through it. They'll tell you how to do things. So before you take on a prospect or a client, before that conversation is about to start, you say, this is what is going to happen. This is not what is going to happen. Are you okay with it? Okay, so you assume that they don't know anything. They can't track changes. This is the lay of the land, and you have to also understand that the universe, the people who give us work, I don't think that they should be aware. They need to be aware. We should expect them to be aware um, uh, that there exist so many types of editing, and these words that we use. First thing is that what edit means to you is not what it means to me. We can look at one 300-word document, and it'll be pretty obvious. Um, and I do what is soup to nuts editing. So I will look at whether you have the words right. So yesterday, for instance, there was a word they used, ambivalent. Okay, they meant ambiguous. Okay, and there was an interview in which all we have is a living house. Okay, so in Bangla there is an expression, boshot bari. This is a Bangladeshi refugee talking about it. So not your vacation house, not a bagan bari, which is literally a garden house, but a house that we live in. So that's something, the only thing that we live in. So it has a particular connotation in Bangla. You can't translate it into English, and you most certainly cannot translate it as living house. So you have to understand what voice is and what voice is not, and take the author from where he is to where he wants to go. So that is the service I provide.
Yes,
And
exactly. I'm so glad you're saying that. It's when you say that you have to take the author where he wants to go, that's exactly our job, to meet the author where she's at. If I come from a certain angle, if I have a certain expectation, I, as the editor, have to find out, I have to identify not just things on the page, but also about the author's expectations, the author's ideas, the author's beliefs, so that then you help meet the author in the best possible manner. I also want to quickly, go back to the points that we had started to talk about in terms of marketing. Of course, I know that we can't really talk about marketing in a very in-depth manner because of the limitations of time. But I also want to bring up, another quote by the editor blogger that we discussed before the interview began, where Richard is again talking about something very interesting, and he says that he talks about, editors acquiring the skills to run a business, and he says that we've been very neglectful of doing that, and I know that you really value it, which is why I want to talk about it. So I'll just quickly quote. Says that a knowing how to do something, even knowing how to do it well, is not usually enough to ensure success. He talks about how editors seem to especially are neglectful of acquiring the skills to run a business successfully. And then he later talks about how there are no courses which will do that, how there is no standardization in so many, in the smallest of the things and the biggest of the things. And I completely related with it, because I had found a course which was on business skills as an editor. And I know that it didn't really do any, like today, whatever I do, I did not do it because of that course. It is very unfortunate that even though there is one fine course I did find, there is really nobody who's going to teach you. So it has to be, in my experience, has to be on the job. If you've had experiences like you've had, running, setting up businesses, then it helps. Then later when you start as an editor and you start your own firm, it certainly helps. But what are your thoughts on, especially for the young editors out there who already started, and they do not have that acumen? What is it that you really can do in this ecosystem?
so first thing is that uh, you learn to do things by making mistakes. There frankly is no other way. Experience is worth whatever price you pay for it. That's one thing. The second thing is that you can go to all kinds of business courses, but unless you actually apply it and do it, it's not going to work out. The other is that there are no business skills for editors. There are business skills. Okay, you either have them or you don't have them. And one motivator is fear. Very good motivator is fear. So you worry about not being able to pay the bills, or you think about not being able to pay the bills. So then it occurs to you, okay, what do I have to do to pay the bills? Why am I not being able to pay my bills? Why am I afraid? So fear is a signal, right? That something is wrong, that something needs fixing. What is wrong? What needs fixing? Don't you have enough clients? Are the clients not paying enough? Are you not making enough profit per unit of time? Are they not regular with their work? Are they not regular with their payments? What is going on here? And frankly, I think when I think about business skills, that when we were in class 4 in school, we were shown a cartoon strip. Okay, and that is probably where I learned about business without not actually realizing it. So Laurel and Hardy set up shop. They sell fish. They buy for $1 a pound of fish for $1, and they sell a pound of fish for $1. And they work very hard, and they make a lot of sales. And on Sunday, after working 6 days, they say that, oh, you know what? We're losing money. And they think about it some more, and they said, okay, we need a bigger truck. Okay, so there you have it, right? I mean, the volume margins that we think about, the volumes that we think about, we think we do more business, we make a lot of money. That's not true. The point is that every transaction that you make should be generating a profit. Okay, so if you're buying at $1 and selling at $1, you're not making a profit. You're renting the car, putting in labor, you're renting the truck, I mean, the gasoline and the fuel, the petrol, there's a labor to it. So you have to figure out at what point you're breaking even, at what point in time you're making profits. So income is not your profit. You have to understand what your costs are. So Richard Eden goes into extreme detail on costs and so on, and calculating costs. But I have developed a system that works a lot for me. So the value that I generate for my client, I should be getting a percentage of. Now, it's a fairly arbitrary system, but the objective is to de-link the rate from the amount of time that I spend, the work that I do, because I am not building bricks out of fly ash. Okay, I am putting in a lifetime of reading and thinking about reading and words and so on. So there's a certain understanding of the market, there's a certain understanding of the audience, there's a certain understanding of the field. They're paying for my expertise. And that expertise is helping them publish or get a grant or whatever. So I'm going to charge them based on that. So the value has to be the price that you charge is not linked to your cost, should not be linked to your cost in markets where you can do that. It should be linked to the value that the other person derives. So you have to be operating, sorry, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Sorry, I was on.
Yeah.
I'm very, very glad that you're pointing this out because, initially I remember you were saying how reading comments, the general questions and the tone of, the questions on ICF, Facebook, and other platform got you worried in the sense that you were seeing how editors are perceiving themselves, especially those who are independent, the way we perceive that ourselves is eventually going to get projected either into the communication we have with an editor, with a non-editor, the pitch we make, the rate we set, which is why I want to talk about everything you're saying here. It's really interlinked with the perception we have. What do we think are we doing? You today know that you're offering X kind of value or X type of value by doing X and Y and Z in a certain number of hours. But really, how do people come to that stage? I have reached at that stage, but I really want others to benefit and understand. Really, maybe you made a few mistakes, and that's why slowly you realized. Maybe you were reading, there were a few friends who were helping you out. How and when did you start to realize that, look, this is what the difference is between the price and the cost? This is what I'm going to charge and not that. When did that start happening?
That doesn't happen. I mean, there's no single point in time. I can tell you about two inflection points that got me wondering whether I am undercharging. So in 2009, I was charging 25 paise a word, and a friend was seeing me slaving through the day and night, and he said, "Rate badha le apna." And I turned around and said something extremely rude, which was that, it's not really within my capacity. And the conversation ended there. And I was doing a doctoral dissertation, and I quoted 25 paise a word, and the dissertation was delivered, and then I didn't hear from the author. And that was not a problem because it was only about 5, 6, 8 days. And then somebody got back to me. She was working for the French Center in Delhi. And the woman who got in touch with me was a friend. I didn't know she was working there. And she said, but why have you raised the invoice for 25 paise? That is what we quoted. No, we pay 1 rupee a word. That is what we're going to pay you. And he said, okay, you take the 25 paise per word and you give me the rest. And we had a good laugh, and that was it. But at that time, it was like quite literally a thunderbolt, that there were people actually paying 1 rupee a word in 2009, which was a lot of money for me at that time. So I realized that there are markets where you can charge that kind of money. Okay. And last week, the day we were talking was Tuesday, I think. That night, somebody got in touch with me via a person I worked with in 2013, and I didn't want to work for him. I primarily because I don't feel like working, but I kind of gave him my go away price, which is a polite way of saying something else. But I basically quoted 50 paise a character. Okay. No, I've been charging per character over the past few months instead of words. I don't do that, which is a ridiculous figure, frankly, for an editor charge in India. And I said, you'll have to give me 50% in advance. So he gets back in touch with me and say, you know what, these guys, the accountants say that they don't have a procurement policy. So do you think you can take the money after you do the work? That will be easier for them. And I said, what about the rates? You're not saying anything about the rates. And then I realized that they're okay, the rates. Okay, so basically what I'm saying here is that you raise the prices. Sometimes they laugh at you. Sometimes they shut the door on your face. Sometimes they'll say yes, and you'll discover that there is a universe you had not imagined.
That's so cool.
So you have to basically go beyond your fear of being turned down. Another thing that I see here is that there's a lot of fear of the unknown, fear of being yelled at, fear of being told no. Okay, so what I have seen pervasive over the forum and over with people I've met is that a no is basically like it's a personal rejection. Okay, so it kind of undermines your sense of who you think you are. Okay, it's not considered a business deal. So we were salesmen. I was a salesman for 9 years.
Surit, I want you to continue on this. Just hold on to this. I just want to quickly, welcome a few new people. We have a lot of new people coming in. I just want to quickly tell them first, thanks a lot for joining in, guys. We still have a little more than 20 minutes. We will be opening the floor for questions for everyone. Surit and I are really in a candid conversation about the perception of editing, how we perceive ourselves, how we perceive our work, and what are the myths and what are the problems that he has faced. And he's talking about, making mistakes and understanding his own value. And the point where he realized, like the universe can be, there is another new universe of, authors and clients. So yeah, go on.
Well, I don't remember what I was saying. What was I saying?
You were talking, we already have questions. You were talking about, so you had started talking about the point where you had charged 50 paise per character, and then you moved on to another point in 2013, right?
Yeah. So basically, I was talking about fear of being told no. So I see a lot of expectations at work. Okay, that I'm going to apply to Priya, and Priya is going to be polite with me, or Priya is going to pay me on time, and Priya is going to do that, and Priya is a nice person or should be, and so on and so forth. But why not behave in a manner that doesn't let Priya be anything other than nice? So you tell Priya, okay, I'll do the work for you, pay me upfront. Okay, I'll do it for you if you send me the work by tomorrow night. If you don't or can't, then I can't meet your deadline. If there are changes to the manuscript after I started editing, I can't guarantee that the rate will be the same or that I will meet the deadline. Why don't you make it really simple for Priya to be the lovely person you want her to be? Okay. And at this point in time, I'm realizing that it's turning out to be an interview of me by you. So I want to turn the spotlight on you now. And let's talk about the time you were thinking about going solo, working for yourself. What were you thinking? What didn't you think?
So are you asking me when I started to think about going independent?
Yeah, so there is a moment in time when you realize that books is what you want to do, and nonfiction books.
Hmm.
Okay, and you were working at it at that time in house. Okay, and at a certain point in time later on, you said to yourself that maybe I want to work for myself.
Hmm.
Okay, so talk to me about why you wanted to work for yourself as a, an editor of nonfiction books in a
Hmm.
market like India, where they probably, I don't know how few, I mean, I don't know what the market size is, but I was probably 500 people writing books every year, and maybe a total combined sales of 10,000 books in retail shops. So, I mean, it's a pretty dismal scene. So, what were your thoughts? Why did you choose particularly development editing, particularly nonfiction, to run a business in? Because it doesn't seem to be an intuitive choice.
Hmm. So I chose developmental editing. So I would say first that I don't only do developmental editing. Instead, what I do is I help authors develop their ideas into credible stories, right? Within that, if I have to use structural editing, I do that. If I have to do a little bit of rewriting or line editing, whatever it is, I'll be able to, use that, customize it as per the need of the author. So that's what I really do. Second, when did I think of, taking the whole, going independent? Is, as I said, after I got that exposure as a commissioning editor, I already knew the kind of books that were being accepted by publishers, the kind of books that were getting rejected by publishers. So I had an idea of, like what kind of books are going to get published. Hence, what kind of authors will need some sort of editing assistance, writing assistance, right? So that did give me an idea. However, whatever I know today, I did not know at that time, because I can say that in publishing, the ecosystem is such that there is no one place to do great market research. There isn't any one platform to get reliable information that's transparent, that's not biased. There isn't. So even if I was to go on the internet, read a few books, I would not have understood what I understand in terms of market research about my own clients, about my own industry. It really comes from experience. And in the Indian publishing trade specifically, as I said again, like there is really no one database. You will not find numbers, you will not find information. And when you say how many authors there are today, I mean, there are lakhs of books that get published every month, right? And this is probably a figure that you can make it global, right? But because you have to look at self publishing, hybrid publishing, traditional publishing, there are so many authors who want to publish their book. Actually, I think that traditional publishers cannot fulfill their need, because they have to look at their own, their own processes, their own accounts. I think there are more authors and less editors, less freelance independent editors. So I think there is a need, and I'm saying it today because I can see it much more than I saw it when I was in my 9 to 5 job. Because, of course, in a particular 9 to 5 job, in my context, there was a certain kind of exposure, but it's only really when you go out there, then you get an understanding of the reality, the market reality. Because, right, as I'm saying, there is no one place where you can gather all the data. These many authors, these many kind of books, these kinds of editors are needed. Vivek had once shared a very interesting article from Scroll, which talked about a debut author who was based in UK, wanted to get published in India, how she struggled, and she talked about how there was no one resource. So there is a yearbook that comes in America, which is for authors. It will list every agent out there, every publisher out there.
That's Jane Friedman's book, right?
There are many yearbooks now, not just one.
Okay.
Every there's 2 3 publishers who do that. So one is Bloomsbury, and there is one more independent organization that does it. But the point is, in India, there isn't anything like that. Something is going to come up, and I know the person who's winning it. So just to answer your question, I wouldn't have known what I know today. So really, the market research is something You can just start to gather as much data from as many sources, but there is no one go-to place, one final answer.
So there's a question that I haven't made clear, obviously, which is that before you started, uh, before you quit your job, before when you were deciding if you should not quit your job and work for yourself, did you not try and understand if you could actually run a business, if this were a viable business opportunity for you, or did you just, one fine day just quit and say we'll figure out what to do if things don't go the way I think it should?
I like to really honestly answer that question. I did not have a business plan in mind. I did not know.
No, no. A business plan is a very formal term for things. I understand what you mean by not having a business plan, but here's the thing. You know, so basically, let me try and explain. So in 2012, I had my last full-time contract, and I knew it was about to end in 2015. And in 2012, also, I learned that the contract would probably not be extended. So I was moonlighting like crazy all along that time and trying to build a network of people who would send me work after my contract expired. Okay. And when the contract ended, I had about 16 to 18 months of household expenses and other expenses. So are you saying that you didn't actually do anything like that?
As I said, the only thing I did was I was doing the research, reading up, understanding what is freelance editing, how many kinds, what I can do, doing courses, understanding rates, how to set rates, finding my X factor, finding what value I could offer, starting to work on the website, etc., etc. All of those I did.
And how do you negotiate fear and uncertainty and doubt now as an independent person, especially since March?
Okay, so I will take that question. However, I must say that we have, I think, only 10 minutes left and we do have a few questions. So, how I'm coping with fear and doubt, I was talking to a friend. I'll just give you an example. I was talking to a friend who wants to write for herself but is in a 9 to 5 job. She wants to quit and the times are difficult. She cannot X and Y and Z. So, she asked me, and I know that she's been wanting to do it for quite a while and she's been asking me, hesitating about quitting and starting. So I said, and she told me all her fears and etc. And I said, you know what? Even the most established book authors, they also doubt themselves. So this is a process that you have to be really objective about. I also myself have to remind myself what is my goal, what is my vision every day. What is it that I'm good at? What can I is it, what is it that I can get better at? It's a daily battle, and I think that's not true only for editors. I think that's true for a lot of people, especially creative professionals, creative individuals, creative service providers. You really have to remind yourself every day, and I hope there are more and more people who don't do it on a daily basis anymore. After a point, there comes a point where you don't have to constantly remind yourself of who you are, what you're offering, what are your strengths, and just look at everything you're doing in a very, very objective manner. So yes, I have fears, but as I'm saying, it's definitely not easy. But as I told my friend, it's the same thing I have to do for myself. I have to remind myself. So I think we have three questions. The first one is for you, Surit. What was the level of editing for which you quoted 25 paise per word in 2009?
Oh, I've never done anything but one kind of editing, which is, basically rip it apart. Uh, just, make the author regret that they ever sent their document to me. So I analyze the text. I look at it from the perspective of the audience, the intended reader. I investigate if there should be as many words as there are, because people generally tend to use more words than they need to, and they don't explain all the concepts as well as they should. Some concepts are over explained, some are not. The titles are usually terrible. They can be changed. The headings are generally terrible. Where I'm allowed, I usually take the word introduction out. I have a particular aversion to that word. I have no idea why. I noticed early on, it was told to me early on that keywords are very important. So I focus on keywords. And I am not afraid of annoying or irritating people. In fact, that's one of my USPs. I will annoy pretty much everybody. And as far as I'm concerned, you haven't done your job unless the author is really, really annoyed, which is basically another way of saying that I will raise as many questions as occur to me about the text to make sure that it is absolutely, absolutely clear. So to give you an example, sometime back, I edited a book, 17 chapters, and the person who was editing the book, the compiler of the book, so to speak, had about 40 years of experience. But it didn't occur to me that I shouldn't be telling her that you have too many graphs and tables. I mean, that's not the way I phrased it. But you have 8,000 words and 24 tables and 19 graphs. Do you really need them? You need to throw away most of them. I also pointed out which tables could be thrown out, which tables could be converted into text, some text that could be converted into graphs, and so on. The really interesting thing is that she took all of my suggestions. Okay, so there are people who will not like it, and there are people who will like it, and you got to generally keep trying. So even the people who hated having to work with me, I realize now they're recommending me behind my back. They're walking up to people and say, please, I mean, work with Surit. It's a
Quickly
pain of, yeah.
interject, because this is a very interesting point and it really connects with the question that someone has asked us. Let me just say out loud the question and also the person. Her answer I will address because I have worked with publishing house, and what Surit is saying, I want to bring that to the question because it kind of answers her question. How should starters in editing field get into major publishing houses for fiction? So I would like to first advise this person that don't only aim at fiction. In the beginning, at least, look at everything, fiction, non-fiction, whatever you can get your hands on. It's a great experience. Yes, dream big, try and specialize. But of course, what Surit is saying, today he's reached a point where he knows that even if the ex-author or client doesn't really like his edits, he still she accepts them and also recommends for her as an editor, right? So you have to, in the context of everything, I hope I hope you were able to listen in to the whole conversation. So try and expand your horizon. Your worldview should be a little bigger than how should you get into the publishing sphere. How should you get accepted? You have to understand that what is it that we're really doing, what is it that you are offering, and can you be that person if if someone says no to you, how will you cope with it, right? So go into that field, go into that profession with this attitude that what you're offering is valuable, because what will happen is that you will have no degrees to give you validation. You really will have not enough things to give you validation like in other professions. So you have to develop an attitude, a worldview, a mindset, and I'm sure all the people here will agree and we're willing to help you out, share resources and links. But first you have to develop that attitude to get into whether you want to work independently right in the beginning, or you want to work with the biggest publishing house, or you want to work with the hybrid publishing house and get that experience and then work with the traditional publishing house. So have a mindset that's really, really open and see, like we're here to help you out. There's another question.
Okay, I want to interject here. So nothing speaks business like a portfolio. Okay, a CV is basically an ad. A portfolio is proof of work. So if you can work with even two authors and you've taken fairly unpublishable stuff into something that an agent or a publisher, however unknown, has published, no, you are battle hardened. You're telling people that I can do the job. I don't just have stars in my eyes. So that's one perspective to consider, perhaps.
Okay, we have one more question. How much should you charge if you've just started freelancing and have 12 years of experience behind you in a bureau?
Okay, so first thing is that is the first question you should not ask. Okay, what you should be charging is based on, like I said earlier in the conversation, the value that your client derives. The number of years in your bureau has nothing to do with anything at all, apart from getting into the door. Okay, that's the only thing it helps you. And one of my bosses told me a long time back that you're only as good as your next quarter's sales. When I used to be a salesman. So the point is, what can you do for me? Can you show me before we do the deal? And is the price high enough to sustain your relationship with the person should the deal work out? So instead of negotiating from a position of scarcity, of weakness, of basically you're thinking at the back of your head, I need the money.
Mm.
You're thinking at the back of your head, this guy has the opportunity to work with me. Okay. So you have to understand that the balance of power is in your favor, not in their favor, and
So well
you've got
said.
to level the playing field in, or make it stronger in your favor. So that's a good way of thinking about things that nobody ever talks about, and that I
I'm
think.
so glad, whoever this, I'm so glad this question has come up with someone who's so experienced, and I'm glad, I really totally relate with your answer. It also reminds me of a book that was recommended to me by Vivek, and I think everyone should really read it. It's The Art, Science, and Voodoo of Freelancing and How to Get Paid as a Freelancer by Jake Fournier. And one of the most important things he says is what also you were saying is that you have to realize you're offering them value. So whether you have 12 years of experience or X or Y number of experience, you have to identify what is it that you're offering, what kind of value, and who's the most suitable person, client, individual, organization who needs it. You might offer, something that's great and of value, and Surit might not need it. So you're just approaching the wrong person, which is what he was also talking about in the beginning, right? You probably are wasting your time if people are saying no or it's too much. You have to understand who's going to be persuaded, who shares your values, right? Those values can be anything, right? So someone saying that Surat, you did an extensive job then when you charged. Which year was that? In 2009, after you explained the job you did, all the tables and graphs.
Yeah, so I've had conversations with people on the forum where they've been surprised that I also look at the content. It's it's the sort of thing that I have been exposed to over the past 3 or 4 years, that you can edit without actually looking at the content. So to give you one example, I was sent some copy for me to evaluate the editing of, and one of the sentences was Connecticut is the capital of Hartford, and the editor had not addressed it. But you don't say things like Maharashtra is the capital of Mumbai, and then the editor lets it go because it's not my job. I don't want to be in that universe. It's not a. I have been in that space, and it's not the sort of work that I can do. I know that people have to do it for many different kinds of reasons that have nothing to do with editing, but it's not a universe that I have been very comfortable in. It's not something I do. So what you call extensive is what I call proper, and yeah, and that's what I have done. So
I don't know why you think. I don't know why you say that you annoy people and authors. Completely untrue. So thank
oh,
you.
you should meet my bosses. You should meet my bosses, my former
Okay.
bosses.
Maybe. Okay. This has been extremely wonderful, Surit. I already had said that I think we'll need more than an hour, and I do think we can still continue the conversation, but this is the time that has been allotted to us. Thank you so much for your precious time. Thank you again to Vivek and Murugraj.
Thanks, Priya. Thanks, Surit. It was a nice conversation. And thanks to all the members who are watching this live on Facebook. So the next session of this interview series will be on October 17th, where we will be in conversation with Anupam Chaudhary and his wife Priyanka. So that's it for now. Have a nice day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.